Strangest human interactions people have ever had. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Back when I used to spend my summers at the beach, there was always this super old lady covered head to toe in leather. Leather pants, vest, boots, hat, and gloves. I mean, anything and everything possible was leather. Anyway, she'd always go around talking to people about her raccoon family, and if they didn't ask, she'd find a way to insert an obscure raccoon fact into the conversation. She wasn't homeless, but she was definitely a little nuts. A few times I remember talking to her, and she'd go on and on about how to care for and raise raccoons, except I never once saw these supposed animals she was obsessed with. We all just thought she was old and losing her mind until one day. I see this old bat walking down the boardwalk in all her leather glory, and in her arms were 3 huge raccoons. She was on some Khaleesi shit. Needless to say, I was shook. So I walked over, and not only did she have her 3 fat babies perched on her, but inside her rolling cart, the kind you see old Chinese ladies with, she had about 6 tiny raccoon babies all bundled inside some blankets. I really couldn't believe it. I had always just written her off as the harmless but crazy imaginary raccoon lady. And here she is, living her best raccoon life. I just hope I grow up to give as little fuck as her one day. I had tons of strange encounters when I lived in Hawaii, but this was one of the weirdest. I was walking home late one night and saw a guy carrying a huge bag of mangoes coming in the other direction. As we're passing, he stops me and asks, "Hey, you want some of these mangoes?" I'm not in the habit of taking mangoes from strange men at night, so I politely refuse. He becomes enraged and starts screaming at me, "What do you mean you don't want any mangoes? You're effing holy." Holy is local slang for white people. "I just don't really need any mangoes right now," I tell him. That seemed to calm him down a bit, and then he asked me, "So what do you think is going to happen in Iraq?" This incident happened around 2004. I told him I had no idea, and then he really lost it. He is screaming at me, "What the F do you mean you don't know? You're a fucking holy. You're supposed to know this shit." I have never actually been in a situation where I thought I was going to have to violently defend myself from an attacker, but this guy was becoming so enraged that I was backing away and trying to figure out what the best way to take him down would be, but then he calms down almost instantly and says, "I don't know, man, it's a crazy world out there, cuz, you know, we go from generation to generation to generation to generation to generation to generation." He continued on like that for about a minute, to generation, and then there's you. So study hard, man, stay in school, and you're going to do great, and I'm sorry, man. And then he just walked away. Once, I went to a Dunkin' Donuts in Philadelphia. I was with a group of friends, so we decided to buy a whole dozen to share. We did the normal song and dance of choosing our 13, baker's dozen, flavors until it came time to pay. There was a large sign on the window advertising a sale, a dozen donuts for, like, $8 or something. I pointed at the sign and asked if the promotion was still available. The man at the register shook his head and said it had expired the other day, and they hadn't taken the sign down, but he would give us the donuts for $7. I was extremely confused and had no idea what was happening. By the end of the interaction, we had haggled a box of Dunkin' Donuts down to 2/3 of what it was supposed to cost. In the US, we very rarely haggle over prices, and it's totally unheard of from a large franchise. To this day, I have no idea what happened. It was a snowy day when I was about 12 years old. Some friends and I were walking on a main street and underhandedly tossing snowballs at passing cars. I hit a van in the windshield, and it pulls over. A 40-ish-year-old guy gets up and walks up to us. He grabs me by the arm and is screaming at us and telling me he is going to hit me in the mouth. At that moment, a woman pushing a stroller with a baby in it and a young girl are passing by. The mom sees what is happening and steps in, telling the guy to get lost. He lets go of me, and we start walking away. We get about 50 feet from them and hear screaming again. We turn around, and the guy is on top of the mom, punching her in the face. We go running back to help, and he gets back in his van and takes off. One car stops, and a woman gets out to help the mom and call the cops. Another car chases the van down while also calling the cops. The cops catch up with the van and pull him over. The van guy had his wife and 3 kids in the car with him. They arrested the dude and took him in. The mom was effed up, and they took her to the hospital. We gave a police report, and I was contacted some time later to testify. Nothing ever came of it, so I don't know what happened, dude, but the whole thing was pretty crazy. I was leaving the science wing of my college and riding in the elevator with a guy from my class. I had spoken to him once or twice, but I certainly did not know him personally. I'm a pretty big fan of widespread panic, a jam band for those of you who do not know, and from appearance, he seemed like the kind of guy who would also be interested in that particular genre. So, trying to make a causal conversation, I asked, "Do you like widespread panic?" He enthusiastically replied, "I love it, the chaos of it all." His response struck me as odd, but the show could be described as chaotic, and truthfully, I was just happy that I had read the situation correctly. I started listing some of the shows I've been trying to find more common ground. And he replied, "Yeah, just crowds running, screaming, the fear, it's a rush that can't be matched." Now somewhat concerned, and with 2 floors to go, I asked, "You do know I'm talking about a band, right?" He looked at me, paused, and simply said, "Oh." We both looked forward, waited for the elevator to settle, and he walked out the door. I'm technically still hired at this location, but I haven't gotten a shift in months, so I guess I don't work there anymore. Anyway, I worked in the deli section of a grocery store, cutting meat for people, putting olives and salads in containers, and stuff like that. I actually have 2 stories, and I think they happen within days of each other, at least. One day, this woman comes in and asks for a medium coleslaw. Okay, easy enough. I package up the coleslaw, am about to close it, and she stops me. "Actually, you can just put a few pieces of ham right on there." "Sorry, ma'am, that's not how it works. Each product is priced differently, and how much you pay depends on its weight. We can package a few slices of ham separately for you, though." She nods, and my coworker chimes in that he'll slice the ham for me. He slices a piece and brings it to her to check that it's the right thickness. Sometimes it won't be, so we have to check. She throws up her hands, seems very upset, and says very loudly, "I'm not used to buying food this way," and walks away. I don't remember if she took her coleslaw or not. My coworker and I just kind of looked at each other and went back to what we were doing. My dad suggested she was on drugs. She didn't seem used to being a human on Earth. I was also tasked with putting prepackaged salads at the front of the deli cases. While I was doing this one day, an old man in a cowboy hat with a very strong southern accent, so strong that I almost couldn't understand what he was saying, started talking to me. This is weird, because I live in the middle of Canada. He has a pie tin in his hand. He asks if I can fill it up with potato salad. Since we do it by weight and would otherwise use a plastic or cardboard container, I see no reason why I couldn't. If it costs him more, it's his choice. I say yes. While adding potato salad to the container, he asks if that amount would feed 4 people. "Well, it depends on your portions," I say. He grunts. I turn around to put the container on the counter to put the price sticker on it, and when I turn back around, he's gone. Nowhere is to be seen. I think I went out of the deli to look for him, but I couldn't find him. I go back and put the container in the cooler, just in case. He returns about an hour later, asks for the potato salad, and leaves. About 5 years ago, I was sitting on a park bench reading. A homeless guy sits on the next bench. I thought, whatever, he can sit wherever he wants, and kept reading, but I felt like he was staring at me. A few minutes later, he casually stands, walks to my bench, and just sits there beside me. I ask him if I can help him with something, and he just says that he is waiting for a friend. I stand up and start leaving, but he stands too and starts following me. I'm not a tough guy by any means, but I know I can look pretty scary to people who don't know me, so I just stared at him, trying to do a scary glare. We looked each other in the eyes for a few seconds, and then he just turned around and walked away. If this was scary for me, I can only imagine what it would have felt like if it happened to a girl. I was 16 and just got my driver's license. I went to the grocery store to get some frozen pizzas before I sat up all night playing Xbox. There was a large park attached to the store's parking lot, so you'd sometimes see your bums or drunk guys walk up, but usually nothing too crazy. I got there around 3 p.m. with my girlfriend, and as soon as I parked my truck, this middle-aged, homeless, crackhead-looking guy came out of nowhere to tell me he would fix my truck. There was nothing wrong with my truck. I said I didn't need anything fixed, and I kept walking to the door. He insists that my AC vacuum was broken and he could fix it. He asked me to crank my truck, and he could tell me the noise that gave it away. Me being the youngster, I did instead of walking off. He then lays his head on the pavement with his face right behind my rear tire and screams for me to put it in reverse while holding the brakes and to floor it. I didn't know much about cars at the time, but I could tell that what he was asking for wasn't going to end well. I got out and said that I get my vehicle worked on by my dad, and he doesn't need to work on my truck. He kept insisting that I would break down before I made it home if I didn't do what he asked. At this point, I was walking to the door, and I saw some workers outside. They witnessed this, and it seemed that they were getting ready to intervene. The guy followed me to the door, almost begging to fix my truck and needing me to let him put his face behind my rear tire while holding the brakes and flooring it in reverse. I just walked in the door with the workers walking to the door with me, kind of aiding me if I needed help, and the guy was getting more and more upset that I wouldn't let him help me. I don't know if this guy was trying to get a lawsuit or asking a kid to help him commit suicide. It was the strangest thing. I'm very lazy in the way I dress. One day, I was out of other color clothes since it wasn't laundry day, so I was forced to dress all pink. My shirt was hot pink, my jeans were salmon pink, and my sneakers were pink with an orangish hue. It's not very fashionable, I know, but I didn't have many clothes to wear, so that was all I had. Needless to say, my pink attire was very eye-catching. That attracted a man. If I have to guess, he was probably in his late 30s, while I was in my early 20s. He stopped me on the sidewalk and asked me who I worked for. At that point, I was still in school and was working as a tutor, so I answered him truthfully, even if I thought it was very weird that a stranger stopped me in the middle of my walk for a conversation. He proceeded to talk about how striking my outfit was and that he really liked it, then told me that if I ever get an internship, I should go to a place that has great opportunities. He also introduced himself as an artist, showed me his art and his website, and said if I ever wanted to learn art, I should email him. The whole time, I was a socially awkward guy who couldn't say anything aside from answering his questions, so I just listened politely and hoped he ended his talk soon because I wanted to go home. He never emailed or called, despite knowing my numbers and address. That was definitely one of the weirdest encounters I have ever experienced. God damn it, this reminds me of this one effing kid from high school. Every time that I interacted with this little shit, it upped the last time as the weirdest interaction of my life. Settle in, kids. The first time I interacted with this kid was by far the most mundane interaction that we had, and it was right after class had gotten out. The halls were packed with students. As I was leaving the classroom, I tried to get something out of my pocket. My pants were a little tight, so I had some difficulty with this, and when I finally pulled my hand free, something else also came out of my pocket and clattered to the floor. I looked down to see that my pocket knife had fallen at the feet of a kid several years my junior. To give some context for what this kid looked like, he was about 5 feet tall and was dressed in cargo shorts every time I saw him. He also looked like the human equivalent of a pug. He just sort of had a scrunched quality to him. As the knife fell to his feet, he looked down at it and then up to me with an expression of pure shock and excitement. He let out a high-pitched squeal and went to pick it up. I quickly snatched it up before he had the chance to grab it, and I legged it out of there. At the time, I was also with 2 of my best friends. We went down to another classroom to talk to some teacher, probably to turn in a late assignment, as all 3 of us have either dyslexia, or both. We were constantly turning shit in late. After we left the classroom, the halls had cleared considerably. In fact, there were only 2 people left standing in the long main hall to the exit, one of whom was a kid and the other a police officer. I quickly fell backwards into the classroom and exited via the side door into the courtyard of the school. My friends and I excitedly came to the conclusion that the kid was probably reporting me to the police for having a knife on campus, extremely prohibited. Nothing ever came of that at the time, but it was weird. A few weeks later, the same 2 friends and I were hanging out in the halls during lunch. Actually, every time I interacted with the kid, it was with the same friends, which our other friends found hilarious. Anyway, 2 of us were leaning against the wall, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw that kid trying to creep up next to us in the least stealthy way possible. He was doing the thing that cartoon characters do, where they have their hands pulled up as they tiptoe in the most exaggerated way possible, but he was making a hilarious amount of noise. My friends and I all stop our conversation to turn and look directly at him, but he keeps effing tiptoeing even after we've all turned to look directly at him. He leans against the wall and slides right next to me. It looks like he's trying to appear cool or something, but he has his stomach dissented. He says something like, "So, hey guys. So, is this like the regular hangout place? Is this the chill spot?" We all just stared at him for a solid several seconds and said, "No, our regular hangout place wasn't in the middle of the hall." We carried on our conversation, hoping he'd F off, but he stuck around. My buddy was having a hard time keeping it together, as he was uncontrollably snickering at how this effing kid talked to people from our fellow kids. We kept talking, and the kid would just occasionally chime in to say stuff like rad, cool, or yay. After a few minutes, the cousin of one of my friends comes over to chat, and almost immediately the kid says, "Hey, is she your girlfriend?" To which my buddy just starts spluttering and stuttering, "Why no, why would you? No. Extremely not." The effing kid then says, "Oh, well." Turning to the cousin to say, "You're so hot. You're the hottest babe I've ever seen." It was at this point that I and all my friends just combusted. My brain couldn't handle this situation anymore, and my legs started just walking away involuntarily while I reportedly made a sound like a tire deflating. My friend's poor cousin let out a heavy sigh and weakly thanked the kid before leaving. We all reconvened later, no cousin this time, and tried to figure out this kid's game. Eventually we came to the conclusion that he was either messing with us or thought that we were in some kind of gang and he was trying to infiltrate our ranks. The third and final interaction was after we were leaving our English class. He came out from behind us and jumped in front of our group. With a weird little flourish, he said, "Hey brothers. Meet you at the place." He then gave us a comically exaggerated wink, and Naruto ran around the corner. We all exchanged glances and went in the opposite direction. I was living in Virginia Beach at this time. Our upstairs neighbor knocked on our door one night, requesting my then boyfriend to come out and look at his car. The neighbor's daughter and some other teen girl had gotten into a physical fight so violent that they threw each other into my guy's car. We'd heard the mom shouting encouragement to her own daughter from her balcony over our front door, but since they moved in, it became a loud place to live. We tried to ignore them. $1,500 worth of damage later, yup. And every night when I'd get home from work, the mom would pop out onto the balcony, asking what my guy was going to do, and try to sell me the idea that it was all the other girl's fault and hers was an angel, etc. Please, lady, I'd had to step out of the house on several occasions just to tell the angel daughter and her 4 male friends to get off my car, as they liked to sit on its hood or roof. Neither of us used car alarms, as we lived close enough to Nas Oceana that the jets would set them off. It was not uncommon to come home to soda cans and candy wrappers tossed near our front door, as they'd also just sit on our porch. About a week after this incident, there was a knock at the door. I opened it. "You busy?" "It's the daughter." "Not really, why?" "So you can drive me to the beach." I shut the door in her face. We went to the leasing office and transferred apartments within a few days. The nerve. First time at a bar with some friends, 19 at the time, and after doing some coke in the back of a dude's truck, different story, I was standing with my buddy waiting for a cab, and it was really late. This guy and his wife, I just called her Sparkle Scarf, I don't remember her much, came up to us and started talking to us. The guy was a realtor and showed us his card and everything, claiming he could get us a really good deal on a Porsche or something and that it was a good idea to buy one now. He was obviously very drunk, and so were we. The truck cocaine guy bought my friends and I almost 10 shots of Fireball each, and so we were sort of just entertaining this guy. He then proceeds to tell me that he has his name tattooed on his ass. I was drunk and like WTF and not thinking clearly, and despite being like "you're full of shit," he then is like, "I'll bet you $100 that I have your name tattooed on my ass." Before I can refuse or do anything else, he pulls down his pants, and in nice cursive writing on a surprisingly plump ass, it says, "Your name." Our cab came, and so we took his card and got into the cab, and the realtor guy came up and gave the taxi driver $40, asking if that was enough to get us home. The driver said yeah, more than enough, but the realtor guy kept making him promise that he'd get us home safe. The driver got kind of freaked out, and then the realtor told us that if we called him tomorrow, he would give us $100, but only if we called the next day. The next day, I tried calling the number on the card, but no one answered. Oh well, thanks, guy. Wonder how much money he's gotten from betting on people and dropping his pants? I was taking the T home from Boston with my girlfriend. We sat down across from this man, who seemed a little off, but I'm not one to judge. When we sat down, he looked up at us, and that's when we realized he was very, very drunk. When we made eye contact, he offered us a beer from a bag he had, which we politely declined. Then he starts explaining why he was on the T that night. I guess he had been sober for like 6 months, then lost his job. Addiction is a disease, so he ended up drinking again. His girlfriend was furious with him and refused to answer his calls or texts all day. She had been an addict of some sort as well, so he was worried he had unintentionally pushed her to relapse too. He was on his way to talk to her so they could help each other pull out of it. After explaining all of that, he told my girlfriend and me to take care of each other because you never know what kind of SHT life is going to throw at you. His stop came before us, and when he got up, he thanked us for listening. We both shook his hand, and I told him I was proud of him and that I had faith he would do what was best for both of them. He gave a very emotional thank you back. I hope they're doing well. My girlfriend and I planned a nice long trip to Hawaii one year and got an amazing deal on a place to stay. This was before Airbnb. Someone's apartment was off Craigslist. He was going out of town for a while and basically was renting his place while he was gone. We arrive late in the evening and find the place. My girlfriend grabs a couple bags out of the rental car and proceeds to carry them in. Less than a minute later, Her, honey, someone's in our shower. Me, what do you mean? Her, there's a man in our shower, he says his name is Bob. Me, the heck? I walk inside, and sure enough, there is an old scraggly guy wet, wrapped in a towel, coming out of the bathroom. Bob, aw, hey man, I'm so sorry, man. I thought y'all were coming tomorrow. I'll be out in just a second. Me : sounds good, dude? I call up the guy renting the place out and explain the situation. Landlord, oh boy, so sorry about that. That's Bob, he's a local character. He's quite harmless, no worries. I was going to get you a fruit basket, but I guess you got a Bob instead. Bob comes out mostly dressed and offers me some whiskey. I decline, as does my girlfriend. We explain that it's been a long trip, and we just need some sleep. He nicely acknowledged the awkwardness of the situation and disappeared into the woods. My girlfriend looks at me, mostly perplexed but a little concerned. Her, well, Bob seemed nice, at least. Me, yeah, he does. Effing Maui, am I right? We laugh it off and go to bed. The next day, I wake up, make some coffee, and go out on the front porch to enjoy myself. There's Bob, spread out on a beach chair in nothing but a thong, just basking in the early morning sun. Me, morning, Bob. Bob, aw, hey man. Good morning. Sorry again about last night. I won't be showering at your place again. Haha, promise. Me, it takes a long sip of coffee. It's cool, buddy, we got over it. Bob, hey, you wanna hit this joint I got? Me, sure, why not? Needless to say, Maui's culture is a little different than what we were used to back home. 14 or maybe 15 years old, I'm walking home in the middle of the night down a side street in my small town. I come across a young man, mid-20s, walking down the middle of the road on his hands. I wander closer and say how impressed I am, as it's a pretty difficult feat. He walks with me on his hands for 5 minutes before flipping over and introducing himself. I recognize his last name as one of the families that lives half a block from my family. He says he's the son who had a bone with an X defect. His doctors told his parents he would never walk and would not likely live past 5 years old. I'm taken aback a bit and ask him how he's been, what he's been up to, and that my grandmother knew his mother well. They had helped out when the neighborhood heard of his disability, being a small town. People are pretty close to each other. He explains to me that he's been on a meth binge for the past week. He's trying to show his girlfriend that she's stronger than the drug she's been taking. He had smoked her into unconsciousness, couldn't sit around the house, and wanted to get out and do something. We talked for an hour or so. It's now getting late, and I don't want to be in too much trouble coming home too late, so he says he'll walk me home. Cool. Not a problem. We talk. We get to my place, and I'm thirsty, and I know he could use a drink. I offer him a drink. Figure guys, harmless. I'll let him come in for some water. We stand in the kitchen and talk, and he draws. He tells me about life, he tells me how hard it was to not listen to the doctors, to get out of bed in the morning, and to do anything when they kept saying he wouldn't live past X age. When he made it to 5, they said he wouldn't live past 7, then 10, then 12, then 15, then 20. He was in his mid-20s now. They said he'd never walk. He took his first step at 4, and he says he lives with constant pain. Walking some days is hard, but it's better than waiting to die. He gave me random advice, guy in his mid-20s ripped out of his effing mind talking to someone much younger than himself. It really meant a lot to me at the time. I hadn't seen my father in 7 years, I'm the oldest male in the family and I was picking up a lot of the slack with my younger siblings. It felt like what having an old brother or someone who wanted good for you in your life. It really got me through the bullshit I was dealing with back then and a lot of the shit I went through in my mid-20s. I ran into him a couple years later. He was in a wheelchair. His condition had gotten worse, but he was still determined to prove the doctors wrong. He was no longer seeing the same woman. She had moved from uppers to bottoms and had OD'd. I've still got his drawings somewhere in one of my art books back home. There was this chick that occasionally hung out with our group of friends. I hadn't seen her in a few months, and then lo and behold, she's the drive-through cashier at a local McDonald's. I'd been on a 2-month dry spell and was foaming at the mouth, so of course I got her number as I was driving off. It turns out she lived in the next apartment complex. Anyway, I text her and invite her over, and she obliges, saying she'll be over after a shower. She's over, and we turn on Netflix, which turns out to be handy after about 3 minutes into the movie. We move to my bedroom and start getting down to business. I go down on her briefly but am turned off by the smell. I finish and am immediately struck by regret. She lives so close, what if she tries to make this normal thing? She was a bad lay, a dead fish, etc. So I hastily come up with a plan. Since I got a couple texts while we were doing the deed, I'll call my roommate, who always answers, and pretend to talk to him about how his car broke down, and I will come right away to pick him up. So I call his phone, and he doesn't pick it up. I panic, call it back, and start talking to myself, "Hey man, I saw your text. Oh, you need me to come pick you up?" While I am finishing my convincing phone call, the voicemail comes on, "I'm sorry." And my face somehow clicks the speaker, "The person you are trying to reach has a voicemail box." I've been exposed, she heard it. I scrambled to end the call while saying, "That's weird, why did it do that?" I muster the only dignity I have and tell her I will drive her back to her place before I go help my friend in need. That is hands down the strangest or creepiest interaction I've ever had with another human being. And no, she never called or texted me back, and I never went back to that McDonald's. I've got two. First one. When I was 15 or 16, I was hanging out at this little strip mall in my hometown with some friends. One of my buddy's girlfriends came by for a minute, so being 15 or 16 years old, this prompted us to all start making sex-related jokes after she left. Handjobs came up in the conversation, which caused this old homeless man to wander over and say, "You kids have it all wrong. Just like my dad told me, if you want a good handjob, you gotta just do it yourself." He then grumbled confidently and wandered off. Number 2. Me, my fiancé, and my brother-in-law went out to eat at TGI Fridays, and being younger people, we got sat at a table next to 6 or so people who were also younger. One of them was effed up. He immediately started having a conversation with us. Funny stuff, he was making sarcastic compliments and pretty much making us laugh. Their food gets brought out. He takes one look at the waitress, who is a blonde, and goes, "There she is, there's my girl. Red, you've always been my favorite. So beautiful." She giggles in confusion and then walks away. Next, the manager comes by to check on the customer experience, as managers usually do. This effing guy takes one look at the manager, breaks out in this huge smile, and says, "Look at you, man. You are a effing animal. I bet you also fuck like an animal." The manager laughs and walks away, and as he is, the guy yells, "Everybody, look at this guy fucks," while motioning to the manager. At this point, one of the people that's not effed up turns to us and is like, "Hey, sorry about my buddy, he's a twin, and he's the one that came out second, so he didn't get quite enough oxygen for a minute or two." We are rolling in laughter at this point, which is the signal for the fucked up guy to grab his whole plate of food, go outside, and eat it in the parking lot. It was pasta, he didn't use any silverware. Okay, here we go. I was working in a mall office for a popular outlet mall chain. This was my first job, and I loved it. One night, I was working the evening shift all by myself. It was dark and raining hard, so the mall was mostly dead. I got pretty lonely, but the security guard would stop by from time to time and goof off with me, so it wasn't so bad. Anyway, I'm there by myself, just staring at the wall, when this woman comes in from the rain. She's about 60 to 70 years old, I'm guessing, wearing a long muumuu and a robe. She doesn't acknowledge me, she just proceeds to light a cigarette. "Ma'am," I say. "You can't smoke indoors. You're welcome to stand outside under the overhang by the door so you don't get wet, though, since it's raining and no one else is here." She stops, looks at me like she's shocked to see I'm there, and just mutters, oh, okay. She looks around in silence for a long moment before asking, "What's this place for, then?" "The mall office. We sell coupon books and rent strollers. Would you like a coupon book?" She mutters and shuffles up to the counter. It takes about a solid minute for her to look around at the counter, surveying the stock. "These are all coupons?" "Yes." Another solid minute of complete silence. The only sound to be heard was the wind and rain howling outside. "You know, do they have a ballerina store here? I think the shoe store might carry ballerina slippers." She shakes her head, angry. No. I need a ballerina. It's for my granddaughter." I don't know how to respond, so I say, "Like a toy? There's a Toys R Us Express down the street." She cuts me off. "No. It's a birthday party. I need a ballerina to come to her birthday. It's for my granddaughter." "You want to buy a ballerina? Like, a person?" "Yes," she says. She stares at me expectantly. "We don't. I don't think anyone sells those, ma'am." She squints her eyes and starts clicking the pen on the counter. "Well? I didn't know what to say for a long time. Then I manage, well, you could probably hire someone, but that wouldn't be like at a mall. You'd have to find children's entertainment. No. I don't want to hire a person. I want to buy a ballerina. At this point, I'm getting a little anxious and hoping the mall security will pop in. He doesn't. The woman begins to furiously scribble something down on a piece of paper she fished from her pocket. I sit in silence as she does so. When I don't respond, she says, "Well? No one sells ballerinas." "Well, where can I go to a store that does?" At this point, it's quite clear that this woman is under the influence of some sort of drug. I'm beginning to get terrified, so consider grabbing the radio to request the security guard come help me. I say slowly. No one sells ballerinas, not here. Nowhere. You can't buy one. Oh, she says. At this point, she has stopped writing and is now folding the paper into a small square. Well, why not? She is much calmer suddenly. "Ma'am, that would be slavery." She looks at me and considers this, nodding in a way that suggests she was pontificating this new information as if it were some deep wisdom. She nods, slips the paper toward me, and leaves in absolute silence. I instantly get up and call the security guard. When he got there, I relayed the story. He reminded me of the paper she left on my desk, so we unfolded it together. It was a Walgreens receipt. I don't remember what had been purchased, but it was pretty mundane, like some crackers and Tylenol or something, but the strange thing was what she had written on the back. She drew a crude sun, round circle with lines coming out, and underneath, in all caps, "Trust no one." This was nearly 8 years ago, and to this day, that interaction haunts me.